Welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jesse Ott, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Welcome, everybody, to Thursdays. We have a really cool and interesting project today. We have industry greats from Washington. They all have variable experiences in the industry, and they all bring something different. And so we have several different wine brands that we will be tasting. And I'll just kind of reiterate what I've told the team here is when Caleb was on my podcast earlier in the year, we kind of bonded over working for St. Michel and the conversation that goes around why we need a sideways moment for Washington Syrah because we all love it so much. And so as we kept talking, this idea of getting industry greats on a call and tasting their favorite wines. I know it's hard to pick one when you're a winemaker, but everybody's got a wine that we're going to taste. And I think what we'll do is just have everybody kind of take a turn. Well, David, do you want to taste your wine?
Sure. So what I, brought to the table was the 2020 Syrah. This is kind of a benchmark wine for us. This is our, blend of 3 sites Syrah, if it makes any sense. All those sites are going to be within a 3.5 mile radius. They're all in Zilla, northern side. All the sites are above 1,200 feet of elevation. They're going to be, kind of anywhere in between 1,200 and 1,500. So you have about half of that being Angelina Vineyards Shiraz Clone 7. Actually, it's not Syrah clone for that. It's actually an Australian clone that was planted originally for Chateau Saint Michel, and then they ended up dropping the contract on that fruit. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. It's fantastic stuff. So then about 30% of that is Carthage, which is one of the highest elevation sites that I talked about, sitting at around 1450. And then the rest of it is 20% Syrah from Copeland. Both of those clones are going to be Joseph Phelps. The other one is, Clone 7 from Angelina. Picked on different dates. The reason for that, I wanted to pick a little bit on the underripened side to hold acidity and kind of front palate. And then a couple, the last 2 sites, which were Copeland and Carthage, I picked a little on the later side so I can get the riper fruit, mid-palate, and finish. Blended post fermentation, aged in about 50% new French oak large format puncheon. The rest of it was large format but neutral puncheons. Aged for about 18 months, filtered, bottled. It's a wine that shows the versatility of Zilla. I think it has, sufficient tension, sufficient acidity, sufficient angularity, but also sufficient notes of a really cool northern Rhone Syrah. So mimicking the blood, the coppery taste notes and smells too. More of the earthier side without losing all those violets and flowers. Mid palate is really tense. I think it's a younger version of this wine still. It's 2020. It still has, some years to go. And yeah, I really think I really love to make this wine specifically because it's 100% Syrah from my favorite region in the state. 3 sites. One of those sites I used to farm. The other 2 I know very closely. Who farms them? The farmers, the teams, and everybody else. So yeah, it's a really fun wine. I really enjoy it.
It's very good. Thank you for sending it.
The bottle up again, David.
Sure.
Okay. 2020.
Can you see it?
Okay.
2020.
Yeah.
Yep. It
Got
goes
it.
like this. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
My absolute.
We're seeing a lot of this now on the spirit side where instead of using barrels, people are using staves. And I know this has been used and time again in wine, but do you feel like it's increasing kind of like where it is with spirits, or are people staying more traditional with aging it in full barrels?
Decreases cost, obviously, if you want, a little bit of that new oak flavor. Nevertheless, I think that the the wine doesn't integrate as well and it doesn't stabilize itself as well with staves compared to, barrels itself. Like the form, shape, staves, thickness, and all that has a lot to do with how the wine actually interacts with the outside world, if it makes any sense on an osmosis way. So the main use of a barrel, it's going to be for stabilization process. And then for flavor and roundness, right? But the main purpose of a barrel is for stabilizing the wine. So
it's more delicate than a spirit-based liquid.
I think that you feel sometimes, if you don't know what you're working with, you feel the disintegration in the palate and the nose of the oak, and the oak sometimes feels like outside of the wine. And when you taste it, it's just like it's just not congealed. So I rather use neutral oak barrels that are like from 2010 than use staves for stabilization purposes. If I don't have money, if I just, let's say, the profile of my wine is just going to be this way, I'd rather use barrels that are old than using staves. But that's just me. It's my own preference, right? It's the vision that I have. Staves, as I said,
it also depends on the tank that you're using or the vessel that you're using. So in other words, if like you're talking about adding oak staves, Jesse, if you're in a stainless steel tank and you're just throwing a bunch of oak staves in there, that wine is still being deprived of oxygen. The main purpose of a barrel is the oxygen interaction that gets into the wine and again helps stabilize that wine and helps allow that wine to slowly transform over that 12 to 18 or 20-month period or whatever that is. When you have it in a stainless steel tank and you drop a bunch of oak staves in there, all you're doing is adding a bunch of flavor, but it doesn't really change the way that wine is.
I agree.
And so it is a different process. And if you're doing, vodka or whatever you're talking about, spirits, that's why they age whiskey in the oak barrels too, to allow that they need to soften up over time. They need oxygen to soften up that alcohols over, 5, 10, 12 years or whatever it is. So I didn't mean to interrupt, David. I'm sorry.
No worries. So, depends on that. I mean, if you have a flex tank that kind of allows, 9 parts per million per year of air into the wine, and you add the staves, well, it's going to mimic way, way more. Just to add on to Trey's, comment here, it's going to mimic more the barrel, if it makes sense. But I also feel that if you use those, it still doesn't do the same thing as the barrel.
Yeah.
Like
I don't think it does quite
really
the same thing for bourbon either. Yeah.
But yeah.
If you notice, those are more high proof. They have to proof themselves out of it a little bit.
And then they basically, with spirits, they do super, super, high proof, as close as you can get to having, no water in the solution. So that's about what percent, proof. And then they dilute from there, right? They just go as close as they can get to pure, sort of alcohol. And then when the spirit is ready, they drop it down with water additions. They don't age with the water because it's just loss and loss and loss.
I mean, they're making good product, but you can definitely tell it's not the same to some degree,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Sure.
I can see Bob's eyes are going, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're talking about this.
No, but it's true. Do you want to just add flavor, or do you want to have the wine made correctly and stabilized?
Right.
A lot goes on in the barrel. This whole thing about extraction and evaporation and evolution and stabilization and oxidation. I mean, so much goes on in the barrel that sticking a chunk of wood in doesn't do it.
So since I have you all captive, I do want to talk about another thing that I would love your opinions on. So a couple of years ago, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Klaas de Jong, who is from the Netherlands, and he is a film producer for winemasters.tv. Have you guys ever heard of this program before? Okay, it's pretty cool. It's actually pretty cool, and the production is pretty amazing. I guess they use a lot of it for people to learn, to be a master sommelier, et cetera, but they do some really cool stuff. Anyway, one of the trips he just came from was in Bordeaux. And you know how in Texas, Dennis, Texas saved the wine industry in France with the rootstocks, right? So what he's telling me is they're now experimenting with the original rootstock in France, and they're saying it's better quality. So I'm just curious, have you guys heard about any of this? Or, I mean, any opinions or any thoughts on it? Because I was really shocked.
My first opinion, it's very risky.
It's expensive. Because it's only a really small plot of land that they started with.
It's not expense, it's the risk of time. How many years have you got before phylloxera ravages your experiment again?
Indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have the benefit of, and Bob's made wine for 50 years now off of Washington grapes that, for the most part, been own rooted. And I always felt like that was sometimes part of the story when I would go out and sell wine from Washington, is that I would say, we're making Cabernet, but it's on Cabernet rootstock. And we're making Cab Franc on Cab Franc rootstock. And so, or not rootstock, it's just its own rooted.
Yeah.
So the expression that you are getting from that clonate Cabernet or whatever you happen to have planted there is a truer expression than if you had it on rootstock. Because the minute you interject something into that growing process, now you've changed the way that plant's going to react. Now, yes, that rootstock is resistant to phylloxera, but maybe it has a different moisture uptake system. Maybe the way that root system is providing nutrients to that plant is a little bit different. And so it's a little bit of a different story. Everything you do in the vineyard, from the time you start pruning, honestly, from the time you decide on what trellising system you're going to use, you've already changed the story of what that final wine is going to be like. If you decided you were going to plant a Goblet block versus a VSP block in a trellising system, those wines next to each other are very different from each other. So every time anything you do in the vineyard, you are making decisions on how that final wine tastes. But hopefully, if you're the winemaker, that is part of your story. That's why I love being in the vineyards more than I love being in the winery itself, because I feel like I'm able to make a larger impact on the final story that I tell my consumer by the amount of time I spend in the vineyards and the things we do in the vineyard. But that's just me. I mean, there's plenty of things you can do in the winery too.
But one of the things I agree with, one of the things that I found about that is when we came home telling that story was we didn't have the vineyard planted in rootstock here and the vineyard planted in native vines here. So we didn't have the own rooted and rootstock side by side to say, oh, this is what's driving it. That was always really curious. I remember coming back from South Africa and tasting my wines in the cellar after being away for a harvest in South Africa and being like, what? These wines, they come across as if they were sweet, as if they had sugar in them. And I knew they didn't. I measured them in the lab. They had no sugar. But there was this incredible floral brightness, this impression of sugar. And then the wine was dry. I was like, what is going on with these wines? I freaked out. I went to my neighbor's cellar. I was like, busted and Zach, I have to take wines. I think my wines are all sweet. And we tasted, we're sweet too. So to me, the South African wines had this dryness, this severity, and Washington wine, the sweetness. And I was like, I don't know, at a rootstock? But I couldn't tell because we had nothing planted on rootstock. Well, we're picking. I hear you. I hear you, man. Technically, we're picking fruit in the rocks at 4 pH. Oh yeah, 4 pH, fresh fruit. pH of 7. Yeah. And sugar before.
Had 23.
So those wines come across as really like what they are, but we can have. Man, I think there's something going on. with the way roots convey. I mean, old world people are like, oh, you've got to taste my Uber Reserve. It's a super special kind of the vineyard we never replanted. And, you know, it never had phylloxera. There's walls around it, whatever. It was up on a hill, you know, isolated. And they show off these pre-phylloxera vines. It's a big deal. But I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Until I think Washington tastes a Syrah with its own roots and a varietal with its own roots and a varietal out of the same vineyard on rootstock.
Yeah.
But Jesse, even that's happening now in Washington. The phylloxera was discovered a few years ago here in Walla Walla, and I don't know anybody that's planting currently in at least
All
in
right.
Walla Walla that is not planting on rootstock.
Yeah, you should.
So anything that's going in today, at least, and I know on Red Mountain is the same way. I know all of Weatherai is on rootstock up there. Anything that's being planted in, probably just for caution, is being planted on rootstock. But again, there's more acres being pulled out than is being planted right now.
But it's the prudent step. It's the right thing to do right now. And it may give us, Caleb, it may give us the chance to do the experiments that compare rooted versus original. So let's see.
At San Michel, I remember being so impressed at the lab cage, that cage of all the wines in the back. You had decades of all these trials, and I think as winemakers, we should do that. We should do barrel select, even if we never sell them and we blend them away. We should do these trials and bottle these up in our cellars so that we know.
Caleb,
Yeah, or then have a big party so we all can come and
we've got
all the wine nerds can come and test it out.
Jesse, I'll mail you a trial that we did, and this goes back to what Caleb was talking about. And Bob, you guys may have even done this when you were at St. Michel, but in the Rocks District where we have Stony Vine, which is where the Psychedelic comes from, I was talking about trellising systems and how the minute you plant a vine and determine your trellising system, you're already affecting the outcome. We have 3 different trellising systems that we work with within Stony Vine, and each small block is independently farmed. It has its own irrigation system. We treat them differently. We have a different crop load on each system. In 2020, we bottled 1 barrel of each trellising system. So the winemaking is identical because we're 100% native, no additions other than a little bit of sulfur. That's just our whole program at the winery anyway. Everything had some different inclusion of stems. The Goblet was, I think, 1/3. The VSP is like 50%. The Fan's 100%. So there was that added dimension of stem inclusion in the wine. However, they were all aged in neutral oak. So we aged them for 18 months in neutral barrel, and we bottled each barrel on its own and had a little different label for each one. And we sold them as a 4-pack. So you got one of each trellising systems, and then you got the blend of all 3, because we do blend those 3 together in some way, shape, or form to come up with a final wine. And it's not meant to just open one. It's meant to have 4 or 5 friends over and to open them all at the same time so you can see the differences that just the trellising system has over the way that wine shows. And it was super fun to do. I can't imagine what St. Michel has in their closet and all the different trials you guys had back then. But yeah.
They probably sold it.
Sounds like, yep, maybe so. I just got to, I am going to sign off here. Jesse, team, what a treat to be with you all. Okay.
Good to see you, Bob, as always.
Take it the next 50 years, okay?
Hope so.
Cheers.
Okay.
Cheers,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye, Bob.
Cheers, Bob.
So, Trey, do you want to taste yours now?
Sure. Yes. Yeah, you bet. We have our Syrah with the 2022 Psychedelic, and it's got that really fun label on it. Looks like a record. If you guys have ever been to our tasting room, it's filled with vinyl.
Delicious, man. I was there last week.
Oh,
it was great. Yeah, it was fantastic. I bought a magnum of your Lewis vineyard.
The flip side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
So
David.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just need to
I
tell you.
appreciate that.
I was there trying all the wines. Yeah.
But that's where the label The idea comes from our love of records and vinyls and stuff. But the Psychedelic is our estate wine off a Stony Vine vineyard. It is planted in what is known as the Rocks District of Milton Freewater, which is an ancient riverbed of cobbles that was washed out of the Blue Mountains and deposited in a huge alluvial fan in the town of Milton Freewater, heading to the west towards the Columbia River. Stony Vine is a 20-acre block, 18 and a half acres planted. We have 3 separate blocks of Syrah, which I mentioned, 3 different trellising systems. Again, we farm each of those trellising systems separately, pick them when we think they're ready. As I mentioned earlier, we have been trying to go picking earlier and earlier. This is 13.3% alcohol, 10% new French oak. It's all puncheons, but mostly neutral. And this is about 70% whole cluster. So the final blend of the 3 trellising systems saw 70% foot crushed, all native ML, a total of 18 months or 17 months in barrel. And it's only racked one time. And that is, well, twice to get it to bottle. But we blend it after about 6 months. We sit down to do our blending trials. And then we leave it in barrel for another full year before we actually bottle. And if you've ever had wine from the Rocks District, it's all about savory. The first 5 or 6 adjectives off of the Rocks District tend to be more savory notes, meaty, briny, earthy, mineral driven. And then the fruit can be plum is kind of the main fruit character, but depending on where you are in the rocks, I have gotten some like red cherry notes and black cherry notes. And so it really just depends on where you are in the Rocks District and also kind of your ripeness level and where you're picking. But that's not the defining feature of that area. The defining feature of that area is all those really cool savory notes. And as Caleb mentioned, those 4.0 pHs, it's interesting because that's a remarkably high pH to pick at. You're finishing at 4.1, but you're still finishing with a TA, a natural TA in the 5s, which is very odd. And so it's still, they don't come across as flabby. They come across as very silky, very soft, but there is still spine of acid holding that wine together.
So basically a bunch of potassium in there, right? To
Huge,
kind of
huge,
acting as a buffer.
The
huge.
buffering capacity, like you could not add enough acid to affect that pH. You
Break
could dump
down
in
the
bags.
capacity of the potassium. Yeah.
Yeah, you could dump in bags and bags of acid into that wine and it would not affect that pH.
Indeed.
So Trey, just by smelling, I felt like yours wine it would be coming from a cooler climate than David's. Is that fair to say?
No, it's actually a
not.
much warmer
So you think
climate.
it's
The
rock?
Rocks District is in a fairly hot part of the Walla Walla Valley. It's on the southern edge of the valley. On the southern edge of the Rocks District abuts Seven Hills Vineyard, which is one of the earlier ripening sites in Walla Walla. And, as I mentioned, I do work with a bunch of different Syrah vineyards. We make 6 different Syrahs. I work with a vineyard called Lake Helene Vineyard. Lake Helene is at the base of the Blue Mountains, and our harvest dates can be anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks different within the Walla Walla Valley in Syrah. Lake Helene picks much later than the Rocks District. The Rocks District in a normal vintage, whatever that is, September 10th through maybe October 1st. Lake Helene, I usually don't even look at it until around October 10th. So
Is Lake Helene the vineyard in your picture behind you?
that is Blue Mountain Vineyard back there. Although it is also a foothills vineyard.
Yeah.
Lake Helene at the top of the vineyard is 1,460 feet. The Rocks District is about 850, where Stony Vine is.
And they're only like 10 miles apart.
Yeah. I mean,
And a
Lake
month
Helene,
difference.
but you're also talking a dramatic soil difference. Lake Helene is some of the deepest soils in the valley, very, very deep, wind-blown lush. and some of the easiest grapes to farm from an irrigation standpoint because it's very consistent soils all the way down, moisture holding capacity. They get quite a bit of rain in the spring and in the fall, so you don't have to irrigate that much up at Lake Helene. In the Rocks District, starting in July, you're watering on a weekly basis consistently all the way through the end of August before you sort of enter into your ripening cycle.
Is there more minerality in the Rocks District?
Well, Pogue would tell you that Kevin Pogue, who's our local geology professor, would tell you that plants don't uptake minerals and deposit them into the grapes. So
Fair
Yeah,
enough. Science wins every time.
sure.
I will tell you that the Rocks District, in my opinion, is the most recognizable AVA, certainly in North America, and if not one of the most recognizable AVAs in the world. And what I mean by that is if you were to taste another wine from another producer, from another vineyard even within the Rocks District, 6 months from now, and someone poured it for you blind, I'm almost convinced that you would be able to pick out where it was from because the terroir of that area is so strong. You have to be a very heavy-handed winemaker to obliterate the character of the Rocks District, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I know a few, but my point being that if you just allow those wines to represent where they're from, 9 out of 10 times you are going to be able to blind guess where that wine is from. That is saying something. It's a very special site, very special growing region that that can do that.
Hey, Jesse, just to share this super quickly, since the 20s and a little bit prior to that, all the way to the 50s or 60s, they were trying to study, minerality. And as we're trying to study it now, but back then there were more funds for that. Now it's just like, whatever. So Emile Peynaud and Pascal Rivero Gayon, which are kind of two of the fathers of modern winemaking and ology itself, in their treatise, they developed this subject that actually they said that there's no such thing as root uptake of minerals, as Trey said, but there is a biochemical difference between soil pHs and rock and root kind of interaction in general that help you uptake certain things through the vascular system of the plant. And usually what they find is that sensory wise, when you're tasting minerality, is that you have a higher concentration of succinic acid in the wine itself. And succinic acid, when you taste it in solution, just like water with a little bit of succinic acid of succinate, it tastes mineral. It tastes like when you taste the minerality in a wine. That, silex and that flavor that you get like from like slate itself comes from, I think, a higher concentration of succinic acid and that kind of root, rock, and soil kind of interaction in general. I don't know more, about that, but I always attributed it as basically an organic acid, which is reactionary to the root soil kind of interaction. Hope that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it's like a freshness. Yeah. Yeah, I do find that it lends to the floral character to the wine sometimes, which again I like. I think it sort of is a good contrast to Syrah can be quite meaty and gamey and dark, and so now you're adding these different complexities with having the stem inclusion. And it's funny because back in my first time working with a vineyard off the Rocks District was back in '09. Caleb, when did you guys? But real quick, when did you plant your vineyard down there when you were when you with Beauty?
I planted it in '08, but I was making wine with Christoph out of the 2000 vintage out of his Caillou.
That's right. You worked on Cerise, right?
His first Caillou.
Oh, Caillou. Okay, okay. Well, I just remember making my first wine out the Rocks District, and I got to work with Rich Funk's vineyard, and he planted in '07. His first crop was in '09, and when Rich offered us fruit from that vineyard, I had been making Syrah already. I was working with Lewis Vineyard. I'd worked with Paul Porteous's vineyard for a few years. Yeah, and when I worked with Dunham, I worked with several Syrah vineyards as well. But we made our wines very similar to um, again, key and ripe. And in '09, when Rich offered us that fruit from the Rocks District, the first thing I asked myself was, what would Christoph do? Because I wanted to, the reason I even wanted to work with Rich's fruit was I admired the wines that Christoph was making. They were so different from anything else coming out of Washington. And I thought, it's got to be his winemaking style. He's French. He's got to be doing something. So I said, what would Christoph do? I said, well, he's got to be using stems. Now, I had no idea if he was or not. He's a very secretive guy. He doesn't talk about that stuff at all. And if I would have called him and asked him, he would have said, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And we started playing with some whole cluster stuff in '09. And that first vintage, I was hooked on stems at that point. I started researching it. I started, reading some manuals. I started talking to some wine shop owners about Côte Rôtie and the Northern Rhone and Saint Joseph and Cornas and drinking those wines, and then going over and visiting and talking to the winemakers over there. And they love whole cluster over there. And that's why we started playing with it. Now there's not one Syrah that I make that doesn't have some inclusion, if not a lot, of stems. You don't want to pick each berry off, berry by berry.
I've done it too. When I was in Argentina, I did it.
No,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that's another, Caleb, that's another, you know, uh, I don't know what kind of winemaking equipment these other winemakers get to work with, but what I've seen, the advancements over the past 10 years when it comes to optical sorting tables and some of the equipment that just even the quality or the advancement of the destemmers and the amount of mog that is knocked out of there. I'm still working with a 20-year-old route. This mantra was like one of Lacole's, you know, cluster destemmers from like the 2001 or two. And when I look at our Bordeaux varietals that we destem in there, I just see all those pieces of leaves and stuff that we're just missing on the sorting table. And I look at that and I think, well, gosh, I mean, I like the wines that we're making. So I wonder if there's some by making those wines where it's the perfect berry size with an optical sorter and it can even measure, believe it or not, it can measure the Brix level. You can set the parameters and it can, as it's going over, it's remarkable. It'll knock out the 26 Brix. It'll knock out the 21 Brix, right? It makes me wonder if you're knocking out a lot of character. Like, what are you taking out of that wine?
That is exactly what I was going to say right now. It's just like it loses the purpose of, of kind of intentional winemaking, because now the intentionality, you leave it to a machine and not yourself and to your vision. It's like a lab telling you what to add into a wine. Exactly. And I just don't like that. I like my dirtiness, my je ne sais quoi, that thing that I can play with and make a wine brighter and funnier and just,
I just feel like they're so boring.
I was down at Mondavi at what's the luxury place in middle of Napa? Not Quintessa, but what's Jesse? What's the Mondavi luxury place? Opus One. So I'm at Opus One, and I'm talking to the winemaker, and we're at this conference, and we're in his cellar. It's summer, so everything's clean, and he's got almost 50 yards of equipment, from his grape receiving tool to the sorter, to the grape cluster sorter, to this, to that, to this, to that, to this, to that, to the crusher, to the post crusher, destemmer, berry sorter, all that stuff, all lined up, ready for harvest, all clean, ready to go. And I just look at this, and I look at it, and I stand next to him, and I say, "So, do you like it?" And he said, "We kind of like it the old way."
Yeah, I mean,
that was it.
Yeah, and here's the thing, those sorters come in handy during during crappy vintages, right? Like, gosh, if you
Right.
really needed them, you
That's
had a lot of
right.
rot, you had a lot of mildew. How
That's
often,
right.
Caleb, how often in 25 years have you seen a sorting table come across with just a ton of flawed grapes? I mean, even 2011, I
Right.
had one, I
No,
would call
I
that
can
the
remember. I
only,
can remember all of the single events where we had to sort grapes because of rot. All of them. I mean, we had a Nebbiolo garbage vineyard that didn't spray in the summer.
yeah. But those
You
are,
ever had? Like, it's not
yeah,
not an issue.
yeah.
Our fruit is so clean in Washington. It is so clean.
Yeah,
This is.
yeah, it
I
is.
remember coming
It
back
is.
from South Africa, and we had a sorting table, and they had downy mildew, they had spiders, they had sunburn, they had things to sort. I came back to Washington, and we were sorting the next vintage, and I'm like, why do I have a sorting table? This is so dumb. I am wasting all this time and money on a sorting table. I'm doing 1 ton an hour to sort nothing.
Mm-hmm. We just, if we know we're working, if we know, first of all, we do know when we're, and I'm in the vineyard all the time. So when we're dropping off fruit from, vineyard ABC, whatever it is, we know the quality level of that stuff. And I'm like, just push it through. There's nothing to sort. Don't worry if,
Nothing to sort.
don't worry if you find a cluster with 2 green berries on it. It's fine,
What? Ah,
That's awesome.
that's funny. Wow.
That's very funny.
So, kind of in closing here,
Ew.
I do want to get your feedback on one more topic that seems to be kind of hot, and that's not alcoholic. What are your thoughts on it? And is it something that is it a thing in Washington?
I hate it. It doesn't work.
It's awful. Those wines
It's
are
I
not
mean,
wine.
undrinkable.
It's for
it's another product. It's a product unrelated to wine in almost every way. I mean, yes, it's wine,
It's
but
hilarious.
it's not.
It's a product unrelated to wine. That's exactly
It's
what it is.
another product, and I totally get it. But it's there's no
Yeah.
way. There's no way you are. I just don't see how you can go from like drinking world class Cabernet and then having a non-alcoholic Cabernet and going, oh, this is just delicious. Like there's a lot of
Yeah,
other
well.
no,
NA. There's a
I've
lot
tasted
of
those
NA beverages
Washington.
out there that are way better. I'd rather go have an NA cocktail any day. I mean, there's some killer NA cocktails being made at every great restaurant in the country now.
Especially, yeah, 'cause alcohol is responsible not just for the alcohol content in a wine. It's responsible for many, many sort of things and reactions and everything else that happens within a wine, including a a very, very
Flavors.
structural part. Without this, acetaldehydes and oxidation of the
Yeah.
tannin and the anthocyanin, or stabilization of the color with the tannin bond in general. It has to do with a lot of different things, with extraction, also with a bunch of different things. I mean, there's many times that you taste the wine that is 13.5% versus a 15.5%, and you can taste the difference. And now you're going from 15.5% to 13.5% to nothing. That's not it's not viable. You're losing the soul of the wine. So, as Trey said, this is not wine. It is not wine. It's
No,
something
it's just
else,
a
but it's not
beverage. It's a
wine.
beverage. So
It's just about.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
There's supposedly some really good German technology that's coming into play. So I'm interested in seeing Claire Warner. She goes to the Tails every year. She's now working with Diageo, but she sold her product Acorn with Seedlip to Diageo, and they were non-alcoholic bitters. And she comes to Tails. She's on the board, but I've asked her, like, how are the wines? She's like, they're improving. I interviewed a guy over in the UK who does all education on BSEC.
the
It's getting better. It's getting better. It's getting better. So we'll see.
issue is you're stepping so far away from the story of what wine is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
again yes, it's a beverage in your glass that you can drink. There's no storytelling behind that. There's no vineyard story. There's no winemaker story. There's no vintage story. It's this product it's like, distilled down and filtered down to nothing, where It's this. It's a product, and so that is what makes what we make, what makes us unique in the world of all alcoholic beverages. Is we have one shot, one time a year. We get to do what we do. We don't make this year round. This comes from a place that has a story. It could be 3 or 4 places. It's okay. Those are stories. No one talks about beer or where was that wheat grown. Tell me about the soil profile. Oh, what was the vintage like when that bourbon was put in?
Yeah.
None of those things happen. They have their own stories, but they're not built around just this single point in time that we have to make our decisions. Like we
Yeah.
are truly making something that is vintage dependent, is varietal dependent on what you get to taste, and we get to put as big or as little an imprint as a winemaker. We get to do that. So that we get to leave that imprint on what we're making for the product. So that's part of the story as well. And again, in a wine, you lost all of that. And so it's like, it's not, I'm not saying
Yeah.
what's the point. I know what the point is. People want to feel like they're drinking wine and have some sort of a connection to it, but you lost the best, for me, you
I've
lost
had
the best part of it. And that's the story.
Yeah. And I get that. I think from my experience on the podcast of the guests that I've had, I had a couple of gentlemen on that were bioengineering some coffee beans. And they said that coffee is a lot like wine, where you can get the terroir of a coffee bean, around the world, because there's all over in different countries as well. And so I feel like coffee may be the only closest, true terroir.
Yeah.
I know it's been done in vodka a few times here and there with winter wheat and this, that, and the other, but I feel like true more coffee's probably about the only other beverage that can come close to that.
I agree with you. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. So just think
If you just added a little more sugar to that coffee fermentation, you could probably get that alcohol level up,
Oh, this has been so fun and so educational. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for kind of helping us plan. It's been a few months. Caleb, thank you so much for organizing all the people. I certainly would love to do this again if y'all are interested. I know we talked about maybe doing a Syrah. That's International Syrah Day, which is February 16th next year. And it doesn't matter what day it's on. We'll just do it.
Can do also, Jesse. It's it's an international Cabernet Franc Day meeting.
Yes.
Also, because Cabernet Franc is something that is kind of underrated over here,
and
I think it speaks to the Yakima Valley more than any other variety.
I was just gonna say the exact same thing. So let's figure out when that is if you guys are interested. I had so much fun. And I think if we can do this, maybe it turns out to be quarterly or something like that, then, it'll catch on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're down.
Right on.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse.
I appreciate it.
Care. Thanks, Rosie. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you, Trey. Bye, Caleb. Bye, Rosie. Jared.
Bye, everybody.
Caleb, David, good to see you guys too.
Great to see you guys.
Yeah,
What
thank
a
you,
ball.
Jesse. Appreciate that.
That was so fun.
Thank you, Jesse, so
Yeah.
much.
Your wines are great. Thank you so much for sending it.
I know, it's all good. I'm glad we got them out to you. I'm glad they made it.
Yes.
They're awesome.
Me too.
Talk to you guys
Yeah.
later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. So, do you have time for just a quick wrap?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, I guess Caleb, you were on in February, right? And we started talking about how fun it would be. I think it started out as kind of a joke of, yeah, let's just the two of us get 6 bottles of Syrah and we'll have quite the plan of what to do after that podcast. And we started talking about bringing on more people and different perspectives and amazing winemakers. And so I'm so happy that it came together and we were able to do it. So
Me too.
thank you so much. It sounded like they had a lot of fun.
I think they did. I think they did. Yep. I think so too.
So the good news is that we had a great conversation. We talked about a lot of things. I really thought it was going to be more taste centric, but it was really about winemakers passionate about what they do, getting to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
really
Playing off one.
enjoyed that.
Good, good. I was glad to see how people were playing off one another. Yeah. I think there's some really good diverse stories there, you know?
Yeah. We didn't get into too much of the stories, just surface level, because we were talking more about Syrah and its place in the world, and I learned a lot. I mean, there was a lot of winemaker talk, which I love. I mean, we'll learn, we'll figure it out
Yeah.
as we go.
Yeah.
But to me, it was just interesting, and I hope Bob can come on again. He was wonderful. He was so fun.
Yeah.
He seemed like he might.
He's always fun. He's always great. You know, I actually brought up a thing about this. I called him. I'm like, hey, I've got this idea, and I wanted to bring him in on this whole idea of like, we got to round up all of the out of work sommeliers who've been, you know, fired for no good reason because the restaurant closed, and connect them to all the Washington wineries that desperately need a regional sales guy, and like put these amazing people
Yeah.
together. And he's like, oh, it's a great idea, Caleb. Love it. He's like, love it. You know, I'd love to do it. I'm like, you would be amazing. You like, you're an anchor in that community. You would be amazing to collect everybody's. I love your energy. I'm so glad you're doing it. This is brilliant ideas. Would he participate? Of course. But
Yeah,
bring
well,
on
I
others.
think
All right, we'll keep doing Syrah. We'll
Yeah,
do
well-
Cat Franc too.
we'll just keep doing Syrah. I mean, there's plenty of like days, international varietal days, like they're every other day on my calendar. So, you know, maybe once a quarter,
Yeah. Yeah.
once a quarter we pick a varietal and maybe we change it up a little bit.
Absolutely. Great. I love it. I love it. And
I
yeah,
think
the
it'll be
Washington
fun.
story is really, it's a powerful one. And it's fun to do this. And I can, you know, this is like, I can pick up on the story and like do some fork videos on different subjects we brought up and whatnot. So yeah. Yeah.
Produced by Fedora J Productions. Tune in next Thursday and have a great week.